Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back after lunch. Thank you very much for coming back to this room and not succumbing to the beauty of Warsaw's royal route, which stretches just in front of the gate of the University of Warsaw. Once again, thank you very much for coming back. I'll say something very short in Polish. Jeżeli Państwo nie rozumiecie języka angielskiego, przed wejściem do sali znajdują się odbiorniki. Można poprosić o odbiornik i będziemy słyszeć wspaniałych tłumaczy. If you don't understand Polish, I don't think we will have much Polish. There are still headsets to be collected and you can listen to simultaneous interpretation. The reason why we're 2 minutes late is that we started lunch break 2 minutes late, so we're perfectly on time, and I welcome you to the first session, Future of Migration in Europe. And we have here absolute experts, both from the EU and from agencies of the United Nations, national governments, and of course, organizations of us, that is civil society. We've asked them to explore evolving patterns of migration in Europe, and we've asked them to identify real, but also perhaps imagined challenges and discuss models of management, or as now we call it, governance. We will start from introduction by Mr. Mikołaj Pawlak of University of Warsaw, who will also at the end manage the Q&A session. The chair of the session is Ms. Marta Pachocka, also University of Warsaw, and the distinguished members of the board, Marta Cygan, DG Migration and Home Affairs, of course, European Union, Alicja Kępka, Ministry of the Interior and Administration, the Republic of Poland, Myroslava Keryk, Ukrainian House Foundation, Kevin J. Allen, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and Paola Alvarez, IOM, International Organization for Migration. Without further ado, I leave you in the hands of the best speakers to address the subject.
Thank you so much. It's not an easy task to say anything about migration after the speech of Professor Heinke Haas. And also it's not an easy task because he already started with the topic which is of my interest. So he was talking quite a lot about failure connected by many people with migration. So I will start with just a few quotes from the post of Reuters I yesterday read about the collapse of Dick Schoof's government in the Netherlands. First one says, the Dutch government collapsed on Tuesday, most likely ushering in a snip election after anti-Muslim politician Geert Wilders, I'm sorry for my pronunciation of Dutch names, quit the right-wing coalition, accusing other parties of failing to back his tougher immigration policies. In the same post, it was commented by the political scientist Jep van Liet, who said, it remains to be seen whether right-wing voters will see the turn of events as a Wilders failure to turn his proposals into reality or rather decide that he needs a bigger mandate to get his way. It was also said that previous government led by current NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte also collapsed after failing to reach a deal on restricting immigration. And in the video with an interview with Geert Wilders, he himself said, I signed for the strictest asylum policy, not for the downfall of the Netherlands. It's some nasty discourse, but you see that it's all connected with obsession with failure. And I will also connect the topic of migration a bit with failure, but also with some other more positive aspects we're going to talk during the next 1 hour and a half. What is the future of migration in Europe? That's our topic. We want to ask this question to representatives of stakeholders that on various levels are involved in crafting strategies of migration governance. We also are very interested in how the exchanges with the research concerning migration, what was very much highlighted by Michail Moschovakos during his introduction, with whom I discussed how to introduce this session. Michail Moschovakos from the DG Research and Innovation. So it is not always easy to connect research and policy making, especially concerning such a hotly debated issue as migration. So the three leading questions of this session are, how will international migration flows in Europe evolve in response to changing global and regional context? what are the key challenges? This is also part of the subtitle of the conference, the question about challenges and opportunities. I will come back to this later. And what is the vision for the future migration governance in the European Union and its member states? We know, and it was already explained by Heinrich Haas, that Europe needs migrants because of demographic changes. European labor markets will not be sustained without migrant workers. Some, of course, dream about the digital revolution, AI, Industry 4.0 or whatever, that it will change the situation of labor markets, but concerning migration, it is not true, because migrants will occupy the positions which cannot be taken by these digital wonders. But for sure, we will have the interesting discussion about these developments in the economy and society in the next sessions. But of course, many people have fears concerning migrations. There is a lot of myths concerning migration that drive the discussion and the way how we govern migration. And it's quite often governed in a securitized framework. Of course, Heinrich has made a great work debunking the myths concerning migration, but still the problem is that this is not, this way of debunking the myths is not leaving the circle of people discussing migration as scholars or experts, and it's still not enough impacting the public debate and the actual policies. So coming back to the subtitle of the conference, changes and opportunities for socio-economic transformations, and linking it to the issue of failure, with what I started. Challenge, according to Cambridge Dictionary, it is something that needs great mental or physical effort in order to be done successfully, and therefore test a person's or organization's ability. The opposite side of success is a failure. So if we have a challenge, we are all the time driven by the fear that we might fail at achieving this goal. The aim of this panel is also to identify real, not imagined challenges. But we talked a lot about myths so far, and we from sociology, and I'm a sociologist, know by the so-called Thomas theorem, which was coined nearly 100 years ago by the scholar who was actually researching migration to USA, that if men, that's how we coined it 100 years ago, let's say, when people define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. So if people create myths concerning migration, and if they talk sometimes even nonsense, it is a condition of our situation, so we cannot escape it. And if one of the myths of migration is that our migration policies are failing, or there is all that failure concerning migration, we need to ask questions, and they were actually asked by anthropologist Arjun Appadurai, how the judgments about the failure are made, and who has the authority to make the judgments about the failure, and who has to accept the judgments about the failure. In the democracy, usually this is the voters who make the final, eventual judgments. But the question for us is how we, scholars and people having claims that their knowledge about certain issues is an expert knowledge, how they can make these judgments and influence, make an impact on this debate. And then the question is who has to accept these judgments, and what we see quite often, the ones who have to accept them are the migrants themselves, who are scapegoated for all the things which are happening around the migration, even if it is not their fault. But also another part of the subtitle of the conference is about opportunities, and this is another kind of failure I like very much, and now I will quote Józef Tischner, Polish philosopher, who said that there is a special kind of failure when you miss an opportunity. Yes, you can fail because you are outnumbered, outpowered by some others. It is a defeat. But sometimes it is because of your inability to do something. And then you turn into kind of a melancholy when you know that something could be done, but you are not capable of doing something about it. So we are also very much fearing that we'll not govern the migration as we would like to, or solve the social problems as we would like to. And Tischner's discourse is very poetic, so I like to quote him. The time of despair is a time without tomorrow. This is about failing because you're defeated by someone, but if you're failing because of your own inability, there is a time of melancholy, which is a time of degrading tomorrow. And the conference is about future, so we probably would like to have a bright future, not degrading one, or not the one without a future, without tomorrow. So we can also ask the question, does migration really has an impact? And I really look forward to tomorrow's keynote speech by Natalie Velfens, who is, as far as I know, going to talk about how to discuss an impact of migration research. And we know the categories of impact, that it might be instrumental. So simply policymakers will listen to researchers and do as they are advised. And of course, it rarely happens. But also we have, as Christina Boswell, Scottish researcher of policies, said, we quite often have a symbolic impact. Yes, so research is used in order to justify or legitimize various policies, and you will always find an economist or a sociologist or a political scientist who will justify your actions, yes, because there is a plurality of voices in social sciences. But again, I'm a sociologist, so I believe that symbolic is real. Yes? So if the legitimacy of research is substantiating certain actions by policymakers, it is also creating this reality. And it's also important, and we cannot disregard the symbolic use of expertise and knowledge. So these are my remarks that we are all the time in that tension connecting migration policies and governance with the fear of failure. And we should be somehow understanding that failure around us, but we should also try to think a bit more in a positive way about it. So in this panel, we'll have speakers representing various levels of governing migration. Even if sometimes we don't believe that members of civil society govern migration, we believe that in that framework of, some call it multi-level governance, they are involved in it, they are still agentic. So starting from the level of European Commission, Marta Cygan was already introduced, but now I'm explaining to you why we have a voice of DG Migration and Home Affairs. She's going to take the floor first. We had the last-minute cancellation by Amparo González Ferrer for Minister of Inclusion, Social Security and Migration of the Kingdom of Spain. We regret that she's not here because it would allow us to have a voice of another member state. But we have here Alicja Kępka, who is substituting Professor Maciej Duszczyk from the Minister of Interior and Administration of Poland. So we'll have a voice of European Commission, of a member state, but we also will have a voice of Ukrainian community in Poland, which is represented by Myroslava Keryk, president of Ukrainian House Foundation. And I'm really looking forward to hear Myroslava's remarks. And of course, migration is governed all the time going in interaction with international organizations. We have two important players at our table. First is Kevin Allen from United Nations High Commissioner in Poland. And of course, being in Poland, you cannot talk about migration without talking about international protection and the situation of Ukrainian war refugees, which is 1 million people of them. And last but not least, we have Paola Alvarez from Global Office in Brussels of International Organization for Migration. So we have all these important actors. Maybe we could have also someone representing, usually in the multi-level governance framework, we also talk about involvement of local governments or regional governments, but we have still a lot of important stakeholders who will present their opinions about the future of migration in Europe. And now I will pass the floor to Marta Pachocka, who is going to chair the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mikołaj, for this great introduction to the session, to its scope. So now the floor is mine, and the next around 60 minutes will be devoted to the contributions of our brilliant speakers. So I do not reintroduce our guests because it was done twice, so now you understand who and why. And we will start taking into consideration the session scope, Mikołaj's introduction, but also our guests' expertise and affiliations. I will ask them about some insights from their specific perspective in terms of migration governance and the future of this migration, especially in our region and in Europe. Each of you will have around 7 to 10 minutes, and I will be strict in terms of time because the schedule of the day is very well planned and detailed. So let us start with the EU level because we have Marta with us. So Marta, what are the key migration-related challenges in Europe and especially regarding our region, so Central and Eastern Europe, where we are now? And what is the EU's vision or strategy for future migration governance, taking into consideration the perspective of DG Home and European Commission?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. In first place, I would like, however, to pass the greetings and the best wishes for the whole conference on behalf of my boss, Acting Director General of DG Home, Migration and Security. She would have loved to be here with you, but that was not possible, so I am also representing her here. And I am extremely glad to be in this particular place with the diversity of speakers and the diversity of the audience as I see. And I think everybody is a part of this discussion, a necessary part of this discussion. Let me also thank the Polish presidency of the Council of the European Union for organizing the conference and the University of Warsaw for hosting it. And obviously, yes, I have to talk about migration after having heard that we have a failure. It's obsession with failure. I did not follow this presentation, so I have a clear mind and I can try to delink these things, apart of the fact that I would like to have a bit more time for reflection like yours, but we are more concrete here, and I will try to escape from failures and maybe from successes and try to get into the gray zone of normality. Why? So I will start with migration-related challenges, as it was requested, especially for Central and Eastern Europe, but I will have at the end also a word about the research related to migration, because it was mentioned by you and it is also an important part of the picture. Why I said gray zone and why I said normality? Because we all know that migration is not a temporary phenomenon. It is a persistent and current aspect of the global landscape. Our President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, in her State of Union address, the last one, she said, migration has been a constant feature of human history. Today, people, just like their ancestors, move to escape wars, poverty, hunger, adverse climate events, looking for better conditions for their future life. Migration is driven by complex factors, including, as she said, political instabilities, wars, conflicts, economic disparities, and finally, a simple climate change. These driving forces can change over time in nature and in scale. But migration itself has always existed in the past, it still exists and will continue to do. So it's a fact of life. Ideally, then, we should find a set of solutions which would be not missed opportunities, if I would refer to what you said in your introduction, but it would be a kind of sustainable, structured, flexible solutions that would together give us a bit longer perspective, which would be then the strategy or vision that you mentioned in your question. In doing so, there are, of course, few challenges, and I will try to focus on three selected that I believe are relevant for all European Union regions, but with a special focus on the Central and Eastern Europe. The first challenge is to overcome, in my view, the first challenge to overcome, in my view, is the need to develop a common understanding. And again, it's not understanding of failure, it's understanding of what it means to manage migration effectively. We need to respond to answer the question, what member states do, what European Union can do, what can we improve, what can we do better in the way member states and European Union manages migration. Managing migration effectively means managing it in all its diverse dimensions. It's about ensuring security of the European Union external borders, preventing irregular migration, fighting migrant smuggling and trafficking in human beings. I will want to say a word about this more. But also ensuring fast and fair asylum procedures and effective returns, and providing legal pathways to the European Union to harness the benefits of migration. Every stakeholder concerned, every member state, every region, every local community, every citizen may put the focus on one or the other aspect of migration. But the European Union perspective is to look at migration management in a comprehensive way, as all these dimensions are strictly and strongly interlinked. And to us, this we call an opportunity. The second challenge is to establish and consolidate the necessary trust between all involved stakeholders to develop and implement effectively commonly agreed policies. Strong and close cooperation is the only way that we can finally get to the effective managing of migration. And as I said, migration has many different dimensions, so the commitment of all stakeholders and the trust between all of them is a kind of a prerequisite. Migration management requires cooperation between the governments, international organizations, civil society, and researchers. The European Union policy on migration has undergone significant reforms after the years of intense negotiations and discussions. And the result is the Pact on Migration and Asylum that entered into force in June the last year and offers a comprehensive approach to strengthen and integrate key EU policies on migration, asylum, border management, and integration. The third challenge, I would say, it's not only to better manage migration today, but to be ready to do it in a sustainable way for the long term. With an ambition to have a system to be able to predict, to be able to be quicker than the events. This is something which I remember very well in the crisis, the first serious crisis in 2015. We were nowhere as the European Commission, as the European Union, member states also. We were not prepared. We did not have it. We did not have a forecast. We were not anticipating. That was a failure, the failure. But we learned the lessons. And what we need are permanent solutions and well-established processes so we can address today's challenges while being prepared for tomorrow. The future challenges are likely to be manifold. This is why our Commissioner for the Internal Affairs and Migration, Magnus Brunner, has mentioned before the European Parliament that a strong focus on preparedness and foresight will be one of the three guiding principles of his mandate, so of us working on this. Anticipation and foresight are needed to reduce irregular arrivals, better assist people in need of protection, and increase the number of returns of those with no right to stay. You may know that recently there was a proposal of the Commission strengthening a return regulation, and this is something which really we expect will have concrete effects. And all this while attracting the talents and skills essential for our growth and balancing our demographic challenges. Anticipation and foresight are equally needed to address more recent phenomenon in an effective way, such as instrumentalization or weaponization of migration, as we have seen happening more often recently. In October this year, we plan to have the first annual asylum and migration report, which will be reporting to the European Council, to the Parliament, to our societies, the state of implementation of the Pact. It will present an assessment of the current migratory situation and serve as an early warning tool to anticipate future migratory flows with projections on arrivals as the evidence basis to better enforce solidarity and responsibility aspects. And here I will just mention that for Central and Eastern Europe, the elements which are specific, which we find specific and which are the source of inspiration for us to work on the pact and the solutions for the whole Union, is indeed the question of instrumentalization, weaponization, because this did not happen before in other places. So a strong lesson, a rich lesson, I would say, which is ongoing. Integration, that I found very well developed in the strategy, in the Polish strategy. Then a specific case of use of temporary protection for our Ukrainian friends. Remember, you probably must know that this particular directive was dormant for many, many years. It was done for something else many, many years ago, and it was finally used now. Lessons learned thing to be used, and look at the news today. I think it will be interesting. And then finally, international cooperation on global way, how you are going to proceed now, contingency planning, an interesting issue. So I have a very small amount of time to just mention that migration research and innovation is very important, and I wanted to refer to what you said at the beginning. I mean, research is absolutely crucial to inform modern research in our place, is absolutely crucial to inform decision-making processes. But it's tailored to do it. It's really wonderful that research and innovation, especially innovation, it's something that has been developed in recent years thanks to the funds dedicated to this, the last one, Horizon, helping also migration. We are more focused, I have to say, on borders, equipment, and security, but also migration is the one, and in the context of contingency and anticipation. Just to give you the concrete number, since 2015, we have funded over 55 migration projects through Horizon, which represents over 160 million in investments, which have provided relevant evidence to inform policymaking. So the decision makers, in order to propose legislative solutions, they use this evidence. And I also wanted to say that this year, 25, in fact, it marks the 10-year anniversary since the Commission stepped up its funding for mitigation and for migration research through Horizon. I will then shorten considerably what I wanted to say, because I wanted just to refer to the lady, to our member of the panel who is not with us, because I wanted to say that I wanted to ask her, because actually he was one of the very concrete examples of having the project, because she was coordinating the Temper project, but you can find it also on the Google. And another one, Link for Skills project, all of them linked with the research and innovation on skills shortages, and also some other examples I wanted to give, but I will not. But just wanted to once more underline the importance of research in migration, because you are going to find around many, many examples of the projects which are done based on the Horizon and on research and innovation activities. So I have to stop, I think,
Yes, because we are slightly over our time and we have still 4 voices. So what we've heard from our colleague Marta from the EC, that language we use matter. Not always everything can be considered only a failure or a success. It's very often up to the arguments we will use. Also, this multi-actor and multi-sectoral perspective was mentioned, so a pure multi-level governance in case of migration field. And also we can learn that good governance is also about using evidence and research results-based material and sources. So that's very nice that you mentioned this research angle in the end of your contribution. And now we are running quickly to the EU member state level. We are in Poland, so the next guest, Alicja, the ministry, one of the main stakeholders in shaping our migration strategy and migration policy in practice. So the floor is yours. The question is more or less the same as I asked for the EU level. So about the migration-related challenges you see as the ministry in Europe and especially in Poland, and what we have as the strategy or the vision to address main migration-related challenges in the future. In this context. So the floor is yours. 10 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Marta. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me here, and I apologize for that Minister Duszczyk couldn't be present at this panel, but unfortunately his parliamentary duties called him, so he couldn't be present here. He was here in the morning. He did a few words of introduction, but I will try to deep dive into the Polish perspective on the issue of migration. And I think I would like to start by emphasizing that Poland is a very unique country in many different ways, especially when it comes to migration. It was already mentioned by Minister Duszczyk and by other speakers today that Poland has undergone many changes over the past decades. It was primarily emigration-focused country. And now we see the changes towards a more immigration-focused country. So we have more people coming to Poland than actually leaving it. And of course, it creates additional challenges and pressures on our society, because I think I can say here openly that the Polish society is rather monocultural, or used to be monocultural. We didn't have that much diversity as maybe many other Western member states, and it definitely creates a new reality for us. When it comes to challenges and opportunities for Poland, I think the most important document that I will base today on is the migration strategy for Poland 2025-2030, which is a very comprehensive strategy that was accepted or approved by the Chancellery of the Prime Minister as the official strategy document for migration policy in Poland. Why is it significant? I think it's because it's one of the documents. It's the document that selects, that shows us the direction in which the migration policy in Poland should go, and it's one of the documents that was adopted in a very long time, because the previous such document was, I guess, in 2016. So when it comes to migration policy in Poland, and this is also what I will talk about it later, is that we see that there are more and more migrants arriving. According to available data, and it's not much, in 2015 there were around 120,000, a bit less, 115,000 people registered in our social insurance institution in ZUS, which gives an impression of how many migrants were in Poland. And 10 years later, we have over 2.5 million. So you can see how fast these changes underwent in Poland, and how much pressure it creates on Polish society. And of course, here I would like to, one of the challenges or the pressures that the Polish society has experienced recently is the migration wave of refugees from Ukraine. Right now we have around 1 million refugees, Ukrainian refugees, who are increasingly deciding to stay in Poland long term. It's changed over the years. Of course, at the beginning, many people hoped for returning to Ukraine, but as the situation changes, as they build their life here in Poland, more and more people decide to stay. And of course, this is very important because previously, of course, we had migration in Poland, but it was rather invisible migration. We had a very well-integrated Vietnamese community. We also had a lot of Ukrainians. We had around 1 million Ukrainians before the war started, but it was rather invisible. And what we experience now is that this migration, Ukrainians are visible in our society, which for the Polish people is a new situation. And of course, considering that a lot of those people will stay here in Poland, we need to think about how we're going to integrate them in the Polish society, which is, of course, it's a two-way process, right? So it's not only about offering Ukrainians language courses or history courses or career development opportunities, but it's also there's a need to educate our own society on how to live with those people all around us. And of course, another example, another challenge is the labor market gaps, which was also already mentioned today. I think that many people saw this Economist front page with Poland screaming that Poland undergoes a huge economic development, and that's I think like more and more people around the world start to recognize that it's a bit of a miracle that our economy grows so much in the recent years, but it also creates some additional challenges for us because we need to accommodate this growth. And of course, we need to fill up those gaps with migrants. And we recognize this in the migration strategy, that on one hand, we need more people, we need to fill up the gaps. But on the other hand, we also need to have control over who is coming to our society, mostly because what I already mentioned before is that our society was so monocultural that we are not prepared to, we need to think about the social cohesion of this process. So this is another very important part that on one hand we need to think about how to develop our economy more, how to help our business owners and entrepreneurs, how to fill up the gaps on our labor market, and also how to be more competitive, because now we are, since our economy is increasing, is developing, we need more and more high-skilled workers. And of course, we are in competition with other member states and other countries in the world. And the last issue that I would like to mention here, and what Marta already mentioned, that of course we have the situation at the border. It's really important to think about the security aspect of the migration policy, because what we can see is that what we experience at the border between Poland and Belarus is not a regular migration flow. It's an instrumentalized migration channel that where hostile regimes are using migrants, or like weaponizing migrants to destabilize European Union from the inside. And we already see that is somewhat successful, because we see that Germany reintroduced internal border controls. This year we will celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Schengen Agreement. So the great achievement of the European Union, one of the greatest achievements. But we see also that the Schengen is struggling right now, and it's all connected to migration flows in Europe. So to summarize, with the challenges, of course, there are also opportunities. And if guests here did not have the opportunity to read the migration strategy, I recommend to check it. It's online, although it's in Polish. But if you contact me, I can also send you the English version. And of course, it explains a lot how Poland wants to approach this new reality. But to summarize in a few words, definitely Polish migration policy needs to be more selective. So we need to have more control over who is coming to our country. But we also need to take care of the people who are already here. So it means that we need to focus on strengthening our integration mechanisms, which is already happening in a way, because we are in the process of building the foreigners integration centers in many cities around Poland. And lastly, I would like to say that we need to prepare our migration systems for this increased migration flow to Poland, which means the digitalization and capacity building in our own administration, not only at the central level, but also at the local government level. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alicja. As the voice from Poland. So this contribution I can briefly summarize as it was about multidimensional transition of our society that we observe. So it's not only about the demographic context, but this is also about the socioeconomic context. This is also about how to manage the society that is becoming more and more diverse instead of being mono-ethnic as we've known it after the Second World War. But this is also about having policy vacuum till 2023 and having a new migration strategy, the one that might be a tool to address the current and the future migration-related challenges. So thank you very much, Alicja, for this insight. And now we are moving from this, let's say, governmental or EU-oriented level. And we would like to give the floor to our colleague, Myroslava, that is one of the strongest and European, highly recognized voices from the Ukrainian community, but also from NGO sector. So, Myroslava, what is the perspective of the migrant community you represent and the migrant-led NGOs in general in the context under discussion today? So this local perspective. So 10 minutes, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for invitation. Hello to everyone. Thank you very much for invitation for this distinguished panel. I think I'm a bit stressed with that. This has a lot of burden on me to represent all the community and the migrant and the Polish NGO sector. But I wanted just maybe to talk more about our perspective, Ukrainian-led migrant organizations and the Ukrainian community, but still some of the postulates I think refer to all the migrant community in Poland. And so from our perspective, I think we still live in the short-term perspective, because we are. It's from both sides. Like, we have still war is going on in Ukraine. We have like evacuation from the Sumy region, from some places in Sumy region. We have shellings, especially today. We have shelling in Sumy. So we really, each day we face people who are newly arrived and with whom like there is not much of the support available. So the NGOs which are functioning in Poland are providing this support. Then also this also refers to the short-term funding, or shortages, especially with the US decisions. So it's also we are in vulnerable situation concerning our functioning on the long-term perspective. So in that sense, we are rather thinking about months than years. Then, so in that sense, I will show more about. My talk will be on the basis of two reports that we did. One we did as a Ukrainian House of the Women-led organizations and their humanitarian humanitarian response in Poland and Ukraine, and I'm concentrating in Poland, and also the Union of Ukrainians in Poland. This is a minority organization. They also did research about the barriers, problems, and challenges of Ukrainian organizations in Poland. And this is also, I would say, not a failure case. It's more how we prevented failure in Poland in 2022, I would say, because that was the mobilization of Polish society, the mobilization of diaspora, mobilization of civic organizations. They managed to accommodate, help, and support the Ukrainian refugees who came to Poland. It's also important to underline this top-down approach that the also state, I would say, faced the challenge and allowed people to work, to access to medical care, to the social security, so that made them at least stable. And they, if the state didn't provided much of the financial support, still they allowed them to work from the day one, and it will help them to survive, to sustain themselves. We know that they work below qualification, but still they work, they have some means to sustain themselves. So I would say this is the success story from 2022, and then the story of failure, how to not to learn from that, and now how not to build on that. But then I would just say a few words about the organizations that managed to, that were part of this success of 22, and what role they played. So I would say that they have a critical role in humanitarian response and welfare provision. They provided immediate response, and they built the bridges between Polish society and Ukraine, and also those who were providing support. These Ukrainian NGOs were central nodes in coordinated spontaneous assistance from Polish communities immediately after the full-scale invasion in 2022. The pre-existing networks and knowledge of both arriving Ukrainians and the situation in Ukraine made them effective bridging ties between Polish society and Ukrainian refugees. They were able to improve and upscale solutions quickly. Then they were integral to the welfare system. They are a crucial supplement to the Polish welfare system, assisting refugees with navigating administrative processes, providing language assistance, and offering essential psychological, social, and vocational support. They act as diagnosers and fixers of problems, expertly negotiating inconsistencies and obstacles in the Polish system that was unprepared for multicultural welfare support. This includes helping with issues like school enrollment, temporary protection status, pension payments, and border crossing for families with different residence status. Also, they are important. They provide holistic and community-rooted and gendered support. Their services are community-rooted, individually tailored, and holistic, focusing on long-term personal and community development. Given that the refugee wave is largely composed of women and children, Ukrainian organizations predominantly led and staffed by women primarily provide support to refugee women and children. This includes cultural activities, psychological support, interwoven into various activities and vocational training that aims to build both individual and national security. What the barriers they face and challenges they faced. That was one of the important things. It's a lack of political representation. And despite the vital civic engagement and increasing inclusion in political discussions, Ukrainian NGOs face numerous barriers to political representation, both national and local levels, due to the nationality and gender. Ukrainians without Polish citizenship cannot vote even in local elections. They are often frustrated that their voices are not adequately heard, even when participating in consultative bodies, and that their advocacy work is often unfunded. So this is also important to be seen, to be represented, to be part of the discussion. Also, later on I'll say about the other discussions. Then diminishing resources and precarity. This is, unfortunately, we have drying out of this local support, of the people's willingness to support, but also lack of funding, as I said before. This means that those organizations are in precarious situation, and really they face quite short-term perspective. Of course, because they're Ukrainian organization, and they will work involuntarily. However, we can see that they have difficulties in, this is psychological difficulties, burnout, because of this situation that war is, full-scale war lasts 3.5 years already, and it's very difficult to survive this time and to function on the full scale. Next thing, which is very important, which actually affects communities. This is the political tensions. This is the ongoing political campaigns and elections, and especially the last one, where you have Ukrainians where the scapegoats, the topic of the campaigns, and let's say 21% of the voters, people who voted for the far-right candidates with strong anti-Ukrainian attitude, and half of the, let's say, the Sunday election showed the candidate who has anti-Ukrainian attitude won the election. So it really affects also the society, because even if the people were not anti-Ukrainian or anti-refugee, but if you bring this topic all the time to the political discussion, you make the problem. You make the topic that there are problems. So it's Poland is a case when you have, let's say 10 years ago, before the Syrian war, the migration refugees, even having them, they were not problem because they were not politicized. But after the 2015, when the refugees became also the part of the election campaign, unfortunately, this worked well for one of the, let's say, former government, former ruling party. And in these elections, they used these migrants, especially Ukrainians, again, to win elections. And unfortunately, this is also the case of liberal candidate who also use this. So this makes quite difficult situation in the country for the organization, quite a lot of frustration, and it's also, how many, 1 minute? No, come on. Okay, so then I will go to, well, it's very difficult to say. So let's say we have what is, let's say for the future, there is what we kind of maybe postulate. So then I will move to postulates. And so definitely there is need of participation in the decision-making, preparing policies. And unfortunately, I will criticize the migration policies because these are the Ukrainian, not Ukrainian, I think all the actors in the criticize. We have local governments, we have even the civic organizations, the academia criticize this policy for not being created in cooperation with consultations, not including our voice. I know that nowadays there is integration policy created, developed. I hope it will be at least consulted, because it's not, I know that it exists already, but we never seen that. So then it's also important to have this representation. I know that nowadays to talk about political rights, it's very difficult, but at least to be part of the consultative bodies or different bodies which are also funded. Not only that they work on the voluntary basis. We have the example of Berlin, where we have the migrant council. There are some functions, some bodies function, which are funded by the local authorities. It's not that voluntary basis. So that also means that we will be, at least our voice will be heard. And it's other thing which I would like to use, that we are also taxpayers. And if we want to be part of the discussion, I mean, we contribute and we want to be part of the discussion. It's not that we are claiming some rights and some rights without contributing to this. And maybe like another postulate which will prevent us from the failing, it's there is a need also of updating the migration policy, because, for instance, it doesn't include online workers or people working in the platforms or others. I think there are really need now to change it, to include the perspective. Of course, there is a war in the borderland of Poland. Yeah. 3 more points, short. The war in the border and what will happen next. Then we need to talk about migration, as also previous speaker said, as a management issue, not as a control issue. Because this is the control, it's all the time goes with the threat, control, but it's a management issue. And I think we will not prevent migration from happening. And then I think it's very important for the Polish society, which is very rooted, the idea of solidarity is very important. I think we should build our policies on solidarity, on what we did good and not on what is bad in people, to evoke bad feelings. And I think this needs a very political leadership based on values, and not on the very temporary interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's obvious that I know Mirosia very well, so I have to only say that always like this. No, come on, how I dare to stop her? But it's only a good example in practice of this, what we can call the increasing agency of NGOs, migrant-led NGOs in Poland. And what we've heard from Mirosia are the examples of these success stories we can say about post-2022 responses to humanitarian issues and reception needs. But also we've heard about some areas to improvement. So, for example, about having the NGO voices being heard to much higher level. So thank you, Mirosia, for this. And now we are moving from NGO level and this local context to EGOs, to UN agencies. And we start with UNHCR that played a crucial role, especially post-2022 in the country as Poland. So this is not a typical country that is the beneficiary of UNHCR support. So, Kevin, what are the key challenges that countries also in Europe face in the context of forced migration issues and asylum? How your agency is helping member states to address policy, legislative and operational issues in the ambits of international protection, mentioned by Mikołaj, refugee inclusion, mentioned by, for example, Myroslava and Marta, and durable solutions mentioned by Alicja. So please, the floor is yours. 10 minutes.
Great, thanks. So as we sit here this afternoon, if you pause and reflect on statistics, there are 123 million people forcibly displaced across the globe. That's roughly the size of the population of Japan. And I'm talking about people who have been driven out of their home in the middle of the night at gunpoint, or because of bombs falling around their community, because of violations of human rights, because of disregard of international humanitarian law, the rules of war. And we see this unprecedented level of forced displacement in no small part because of a crisis of multilateralism, and we can trace that from the UN Security Council down to regional bodies, but also a disregard for the rule of law. Two key features which emerged out of World War II, the UN Charter, the UN Declaration of Human Rights, and a rules-based international order. So I'm going to focus on that particular part of people who are on the move globally. What I will not focus on is people who are voluntarily moving to get a better job, to start a business, to contribute to the economy of a country, but I will focus on forced displacement. And maybe a first point, even though I'm with a group of distinguished participants and many academics, I always find that it's important to at least pause and make an intellectual distinction between migrants and refugees, between migration and refugee protection and seeking asylum, because they're very different from a policy perspective and also from a legal perspective. So I mentioned World War II, and one of the things that was born out of World War II was the 1951 Refugee Convention, which makes it very clear that if an individual does not have national protection in his or her home country and has a well-founded fear of persecution on the different grounds that are elaborated in the convention, he or she has the right to seek asylum. This is not discretionary, and the principle of non-refoulement, whether a member state or a country has ratified the 1951 Refugee Convention or not, is a principle of international customary law. It's a jus cogens norm. Now, this in juxtaposition with migration is quite different, because if I am a business person in Bangladesh and I want to start a business in India, I don't have the right to do that. But there's a procedure, there's a process I have to go through to get the right paperwork, the right visa, to establish my company, and to hire workers. If I'm a young restaurant worker in the United States and I want to work in Argentina in a bar in Buenos Aires, I don't have the right to do that. I can apply for a visa, a work visa, to do that. And for all the reasons that you know and were elaborated in the introductory sessions this morning, there are many positives of regulated labor migration. But that is not my work as UNHCR, as UN High Commissioner for Refugees. And what I want to talk a little bit about is why we see such a challenge, perhaps not a crisis, but a challenge between managing, and I think Marta used the touchstone word, management, managing migration and managing the issue of asylum. One of the things that I should say at the outset is, even though I work for UNHCR, we do not propose open borders. We are very cognizant of national security concerns, and we think it is critical to have strong border management systems. Because if you don't have that, the institution of asylum will be abused, and it will be diluted. And voters and politicians will suddenly see, this doesn't strike me as very fair, that people are abusing this precious institution of asylum. So when we talk about how to address these challenges, and I'll tie this very soon into the pact on migration and asylum, we think it's critical to have intellectual clarity in terms of the different legal and policy ambits, migration and people seeking asylum or international protection. And at the same time, to have a pragmatic and balanced normative framework. So when we look at the global context, it's very clear that one of the drivers of population movements, and this can be refugees or economic migrants, relates to the lack of development, to poverty, to climate change, etc. But when we talk about the source countries, especially in the European context, we also see, and my friend from IOM, I'm sure will speak about this, and it's something that IOM works a lot on, trafficking, and where you have unscrupulous criminal syndicates or networks who take advantage of people, both people who want to leave because they want a better life, they want to make more money, have a better living, but also people who are fleeing gender-based violence, persecution because of their political opinion, because of their race or nationality. And so in both of those ambits, this issue of trafficking is a major problem that we have to face together, and criminality. Now, one of the key tools that we think is useful for member states in Europe, but also further afield, is having clear screening procedures, border procedures at the border, safeguards for people who are seeking international protection. Not open borders, but the ability to have due process, to say, I'm here to seek a claim, but you should also have, as a member state, as a government, the ability to expeditiously, but fairly, assess whether that is a valid claim or not a valid claim. And if it's not a valid claim and the person has had the ability to seek asylum, to have his or her day in court, as it were, to have administrative or judicial due process, it's also critical that returns are possible. And this is the returns regulation we were talking about, the kind of missing piece, perhaps, of the Pact on Migration and Asylum, which is so critical. And you may also find it strange for me to put such an emphasis on this as UNHCR. But if the return of people who are not refugees, who have abused the institution of asylum, does not occur, the whole system breaks down. And suddenly we have member states who want to externalize international protection obligations, who want to ask a third country to do it, not them, because that very precious institution of asylum has been abused. So having border procedures, having rigorous screening procedures, all very important. And we could even talk about the safe third country concept, which is something that some of you may be familiar with. It features within the pact. This is complicated to negotiate, but essentially the core of what this means conceptually is that there's nothing in the 1951 Refugee Convention that says you have the right to seek asylum in New York City or in Sydney or in London. And we know that globally there is a lot of what I call forum shopping, going to the first, second, third, fourth, even fifth safe country of asylum before reaching the place that they would like to seek asylum. Now, there may be reasons in some instances that that's justified. If, for example, my wife is in London or New York City, and I'm fleeing from Sudan. Well, then there's a different calculus and assessment that maybe needs to take place. But generally speaking, you should have the right to seek asylum in the first safe country. Not necessarily the most wealthy country, not necessarily the nicest country, but a safe country where you can seek asylum. Now, all of the things that I've just mentioned essentially are part and parcel of the Pact on Migration and Asylum. And many of you, if not all of you, know that this was the product of, I think, six years, if I'm not mistaken, Marta, of difficult negotiations. And we don't think as UNHCR that it's a perfect framework. There are no perfect frameworks when you have many different member states involved. But it reaches a lot of the key points from our perspective. 1 minute, okay. And there are some member states who take issue with some of it. One of them happens to be sitting here in the room with us for different reasons, like the solidarity mechanism, or perhaps the fact that it doesn't necessarily contemplate the specific situation in the east of Europe. All of that said, we think it's still a very good tool and mechanism to help member states do exactly what Marta said, and that is to manage migration and asylum issues. Last thing I'll say, smart policy when it comes to refugees can be a win-win for the economy also. The purpose of admitting refugees is not to increase labor productivity, but if policy is smart, you can have that result, even though that's not the reason that refugees left their home. And Poland is no better example, and Miriam talked about this a little bit. In 2023, we did a study with Deloitte. My friend Pavel from CMR knows about this very well, which showed that Ukrainian refugees in Poland contributed to 1% of the GDP of the country. Stay tuned, because on 10 June, next week, we're going to launch a second report. And I can't tell you the statistics, but I can tell you now, you'll be shocked at how much that's gone up in the last 2 years. It's a win-win. It's a net positive for the country. Refugees are paying taxes, they're paying to Social Security. It's a contribution to the economy. Now, it's different than migration because it wasn't planned. Somebody didn't leave their house with bombs falling around it for economic reasons, but they can still be included in a way that benefits the country. I'll park the issue of instrumentalization and weaponization. There's a lot we could talk about on that, but I take note of some of the comments from my good friends and colleagues. If time permits, I wouldn't mind delving into a little bit on the EC communique from December of 2024 on that issue, but that's a more complex kettle of fish which we can park.
Thank you, Kevin, so much. To be almost on time, so you've done some links to other speeches and contributions by our colleagues. So we've heard about also links to, from the UNHCR perspective, to a new pact on migration and asylum, to the specific tools in the EU context, like a screening procedure and border one. We've learned also about the specificity of this UN agency as the one that is focused on forced migration and about its post-Second World War institutional frameworks and developments. So also you've mentioned this management context, and I would say that there is something else to stress. Management of migration and governing of migration, also as two different frameworks, with the first one being more technical and operational. So having said this, I would like to give the floor to my very patient, but still one of our brilliant speakers, Paola from the International Organization for Migration. So these UN agencies that has this broader scope mostly on what we can name as researchers voluntary migration, but still this humanitarian force component is there. So please let us know, Paola, what is the stance of the IOM regarding migration challenges we have on the table today, and what about future responses taking into consideration your field of expertise, so labor mobility and social inclusion?
Thank you very much to the organizers, and thanks for inviting us to this panel. So you asked what is our stance, and because of the title of the conference, the future of mobilities as well, I would like to say that migration is a defining feature of Europe's future. So that's where I would like to start. The EU sets very ambitious goals on competitiveness and a just transition, and it means that these goals will touch upon several sectoral policies: migration, education, employment, welfare, etc. We were asked also to set or outline some trends. So I would like to start by highlighting 3 trends and to share with you some actions to address them. The first trend, it's no secret to anyone here, it's that Europe's population is aging and the workforce is shrinking. And some stats tell us that the share of Europe's population in the world will be 4% in 2070 compared to 6% today. By 2050, the share of population over 60 years old will be 30% compared to 20% today. And while Europeans, luckily enough, are living longer and healthier lives, this raises questions about, for example, increased demand in care services, but also the sustainability of welfare and pension systems. The second trend is that the EU is facing acute labor and skills shortages. Not only because of the demographic dynamics that I just mentioned, but also linked to technological transformation, the transition to climate-neutral economies, all of which are reshaping the skills landscapes. So in 2023, as an example, small and medium-sized enterprises that were surveyed through the Flash Eurobarometer survey, 74% of these SMEs declared that they were facing shortages, and 53% found it very difficult to retain skilled workers. There are 42 occupations EU-wide that are facing shortages at all skill levels, from engineering to healthcare, logistics, transportation, construction, etc. There are also new skills requirements. We expect that the green transition is going to create between 1 million and 2.5 million new jobs by 2030. And this is obviously linked to goals concerning productivity and competitiveness if the right skills are not in place. The third trend I would like to highlight is that labor mobility and inclusion, for some strange reason, are still treated as separate domains. And this is despite the fact that migrant workers who are legally residing in European Union member states are still facing barriers to access services, and they are more at risk of poverty or exclusion than EU nationals. So what to do? In terms of actions, there are many non-migration-based solutions to these trends, of course. You can align the training outcomes better to the labor market needs. You can emphasize how to activate underrepresented groups in the labor market. You can also improve working conditions, but you can also have effective labor migration policies in place. And there are some indications that this is already happening. More than a third of the almost 4 million first residence permits delivered by the EU to non-EU citizens in 2023 were for work. There are 290 regular labor migration pathways to the EU, and these pathways set different channels for labor migration, different procedures for admission or criteria for admission, different volumes of admission. The EU member states have also made some adaptations to some of these policies to make it easier to recruit from outside of the EU, lowering, for example, the income thresholds for specific occupations or sectors, or exempting shortage occupations from labor market tests. The EU itself and the EU member states have launched EU talent partnerships with partner countries like Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Bangladesh, and Pakistan to facilitate mobility for training and work purposes in an organized way. So all of these, there are member states that have signed bilateral agreements. There are also other member states that are exploring complementary labor pathways for refugees, as you mentioned. They do not come for that purpose, but they can find jobs. And these different frameworks provide different types of organized labor mobility options. which take to different degrees into consideration development measures, for example, supporting education and training systems in countries of origin. But I mean, it's a good thing that there is a variety of options to recruit from outside the EU. At the same time, this highlights the great complexity of the systems that are in place and that are ultimately very difficult to navigate for the end users, for workers and employers. These schemes also take a fair amount of work and time to be structured because they rely on evidence, they rely on very robust data and institutional capacities to deliver on all sides. But most importantly, they rely on trust and extensive coordination among a wide variety of stakeholders that operate in different jurisdictions, different sectors at different levels and with different mandates. You have employment, immigration authorities, public employment services, businesses, civil society, trade unions, and so on. But the barriers remain also very pragmatic in nature. One key issue is data. We need more data on sectoral and occupational shortages, not only at national level, but also at territorial level, ideally with the participation of the private sector. And the good news is that the European Skills Intelligence Observatory, which is going to be established under the Union of Skills, might provide more granular data and more integrated data at EU level. Immigration procedures need to be streamlined and optimized. The recast of the Single Permit Directive in 2024 is a step in that direction because it aimed at reducing the length of the process for the application of a residence and work permit. So we will see what will happen next year when EU member states will have to transpose it to the national law. Functioning matching systems are critical. Again, here, an EU-led initiative, it's the establishment of an EU talent pool, which will be the first EU-wide platform to connect third country workers with vacancies across the EU in shortage occupations. But, you know, to make it work, there are still some considerations. One is communication. We know that many platforms exist, but to what extent employers and for the screening of the third country national workers will be also key that they are transparent and that they are very clear. And the added value of such a platform is, ideally, that it provides also comprehensive information on, for example, existing pathways, recruitment, immigration, and recognition processes, the costs of those processes, maybe the services that are available to support the candidates, and so on. IOM usually takes a lot of, takes to heart the information provision. And we support migrant resource centers that provide information, but also a range of services, from language training to others. Another key issue, streamlining recognition of qualifications, it's going to be key. Again, the European Commission released some recommendations to EU member states to facilitate the recognition of qualifications. And what is very important is that they highlighted the skills-first approach. So it's not only about formal qualifications, it's also about skills and prior learning. Language training, I say it very quickly, it's very key, not only because it allows or hinders access to services and social participation, but it is also one of the most important criteria for work permits, for example. And lastly, migrants are not commodities. So here is where the labor, mobility, and integration dimensions should not be dissociated. And you know, the European Union Action Plan on Integration and Inclusion pointed out very rightly to access to services or issues like education, employment, housing, and healthcare as factors that are directly affecting the outcomes of integration. But it's not only about that. It's not only about access to services. It's first and foremost, am I going to be welcomed in a new society? Am I going to be free from discrimination? And fighting this structural discrimination is very important. IOM, for example, has worked with police zones in Belgium to enhance complaints mechanisms against xenophobic acts, but also to enable more interactions between police and migrant communities. And we have also worked in Spain, for example, to train media professionals to communicate more ethically about migration. So overall, I think it's about policy coherence between migration, employment, education, and overall social inclusion policies.
Thanks so much, Paul. In fact, what you've said is not only about voluntary migration, because the issues you mentioned, like recognition of skills, of qualifications, integration, the specific even EU tools, this is all that can be also applied to people with protection statuses, including migrants with a refugee status or with temporary protection. So thanks for this contribution, also for mentioning the need for data, the data that are broken by sectors and also by administrative units, because this is important. I know at least 2 EU-funded projects, Horizon projects for undercurrent Horizon Europe scheme that are about skills and competences. So in the meantime, so firstly, thank you very much for these contributions. Some of them more or less within the time, some a bit longer, but I understand that it's very hard, to be so precise when we have so much also expertise to share. So we are introducing a small revision of the final point of the agenda with Mikołaj. So he will skip his brief summary. Now I will give each of you 1 minute, no more, really. I will be strict, to provide us with the key message, a key takeaway from your point of view. And we will start with the same order. So Marta.
Thank you very much. Can I have 1 minute of my messages, plus at the end, if there will be time, 1 minute free?
We don't know. We will see about timing.
So just the message that you asked of 1 minute is that what our discussion has shown is that the multiple facets of migration among different stakeholders which we're discussing, they are multiple. So, and they, in terms of issues to be covered, in terms of specific situations to address, depending on the regions concerned. Now, the EU perspective is what we need to build and implement solutions that will work for all, cover all these dimensions, and we hope they will be sustainable in the longer term, not only for today. And this is why the approach implemented is based on the combination of solidarity and responsibility among member states, alongside a constant engagement with our partners in the third countries, with a common understanding of the challenges, with mutually agreed solutions that provide the right balance and take into consideration the variety of situations we hope we could be prepared together to the future of migration in Europe.
Thank you so much. That's very great to be on time. Alicja.
Thank you. So I think one key message is that migration is not a new phenomenon, but at least for Poland, it is a new reality, which should be considered as a challenge, but also as an opportunity in many different ways. And Poland has this unique opportunity to shape and influence our migration policy, our migration governance, based on experience from other countries, but also based on our own unique experience. And we see that this experience is recognized wider and wider, both at the European level, but also at the international level. And just a few words about the migration strategy. I realized that it was a quite controversial document. There was a lot of discussions, but I think at least one positive thing that it created is that it sparked this discussion. And the conversation is not yet over. We are working on the implementation plan of the migration strategy. So I'm sure that we will continue this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alicja, for being brief. Now, Miroslava, 1 minute.
Okay. Well, to summarize, I would say that we are after the elections. We can see that playing with the populist rhetorics, far-right rhetorics, using migration, it doesn't work well for the society, because we create the divisions in the society, we create the enemies in the society. It works not well for the society as a whole. And I think in this sense, we should think about migration and as a management issue, how to manage. We need to also work with the whole society, inform the whole society, not having data. We have in Poland data about the input of the migrants and refugees into the society, what Kevin also said, what they will present. We have this data, but it's still not vocal enough to show the input, to show how beneficial is social policy society from having us here. So I think this is very important, that integration is a both-way process, but it usually requires from us to be integrated here. Not like that, it doesn't work with the society to accept us well. So I think the Polish solidarity from 2022 should be example how to build on. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Now, Kevin.
I'm not a politician, but if I was, I think what I would tell the electorate I was seeking votes from is, you can do it all. You can address national security concerns. You can be tough on that issue, and you need to be as a sovereign state. You can have regulated migration with clear rules and procedures that aren't abused, which will benefit the economy. And number three, you can do the right thing and respect international law and European values by having safeguards for asylum seekers, but that institution can't be abused. You have to have a rigorous procedure for all aspects of this, but if you do that and you have policy coherence and balance, you can do it all.
Thank you so much. And Paola.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway is that by better aligning strategies on migration, education, employment, overall social inclusion, Europe has still an opportunity to turn migration into a driver of its competitiveness.
Thank you so much. So now we will prolong the session only about 5 minutes because we were a bit late. So we have time for one question from the audience. Mikołaj. But at least we accommodated 2 small rounds of your contributions. That is the price.
Yeah, we don't want to consume the break time. It's better to have a discussion during the break. So we can have one question. I see Marta Kindler there. Could you pass the microphone there?
Thank you very much, Marta Kindler, University of Warsaw. I have a question to Ms. Marta Cygan. You said that one of the long-term goals now of the EU will be better assistance of those in need of protection. And how can this be done in case of your member states actually actively violating this goal, such as Poland has done now by temporarily lifting the right for asylum? So this is a question. And also I wanted to comment a bit, because it was said as well that we have in the EU 290 regular migration pathways, which sounds very impressive. But at the same time, when we hear about the so-called abuse of asylum procedure, what is its cause? I would like to hear some reflections on that as well. Thank you.
So, Marta Cygan, floor is.
Please.
If I need to be short, the pact, one of the goals of the pact, as I mentioned, so the solution for the future for migration, long time negotiated and really discussed, is to ensure the proper protection of people in need with the short, simple procedure. Only when it will be implemented, it can happen. But I mean, so you will find it a bureaucratic response, but that's the case. If every member state, it's like with returns now. For a long time, we have different systems in member states for returns. Now, with the new proposal of the Commission, we propose one procedure with one solution, with possibility to recognize the return decisions. So it becomes all simple, and controllable. It's easy to monitor. It's easy to avoid all types of abuses. And the same is for the rules on asylum. So the important question is the question of implementation. But what I wanted to use the opportunity now to when talking about arrivals, and mostly then we are referring always to these irregular arrivals. I heard the sentence in the discussion that there was no, there was no preparation to support a number of migrants. The country was not prepared, and that is situation of crisis. That was situation of Greece in 2015 when we had 1,200,000 people arriving and 800 people asking for asylum, in the situation when the Greeks just set up the system, the law for asylum in order to deal with the requests of asylum, and also setting up the tools like, for example, the interviews, the interpreters, in order to allow this to happen. The same I can see in the Polish case. You have a huge amount of people coming at the same time, so it's not the question of not being prepared, but not being prepared for such a huge flow, which is the situation of crisis. And all of these cases came to us, in the Polish case because of the war. You maybe could have foreseen it before, but in Greek cases, you did not foresee it at all, and you had to foresee it because there are wars in other parts of the world. So you see, this is all about this anticipation and forecast, but we cannot also, we have to understand member states that are in this situation, and this is why we want to propose the solution by implementation of the pact to be solved in a comprehensive way for everybody by being prepared for this crisis. You look at me, I know it. By being prepared for this crisis and by knowing before that it can happen, so that to avoid the situation that is for us lessons learned. But I would not say not enough prepared, because we are talking about crisis situations, and from all of these, with system which we had, we could not do anything more. So the construction is for the future, and this is why the title of the conference is so good.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This is how the first panel, the first session ends. We've had keynote from Mr. Mikołaj Pawlak. The chair was Marta Pachocka, both from the University of Warsaw, and our speakers, Marta Cygan, Alicja Kępka, Myroslava, Keryk, Kevin Allen, and Paola Alvarez. Please, let's put our hands together for this fantastic panel. And the bad news is that we already 1/3 into our coffee break. So please, let's be back in about 10, 12 minutes. Thank you.
Yes.